Hello everyone, welcome back. Sit down, because what we're about to discuss is something the narcissist has spent their entire life making sure you never discovered. There is a moment, a specific, seismic, irreversible moment, when the power in this dynamic flips completely, and it terrifies them beyond description. For years, the story has been told one way. The narcissist dominates. The empath suffers. The narcissist controls. The empath shrinks. That has been the accepted narrative, the one the narcissist wrote, directed, and distributed. But there is a chapter they deliberately left out. And that chapter belongs to you. What happens when the most patient person finally runs out of patience? What happens when someone who absorbed punishment silently for years suddenly stops absorbing and starts reflecting? What happens when the empath, pushed past every conceivable limit, finally becomes something the narcissist never prepared for? Here is what happens. The entire architecture of the narcissist's world begins to crack. Because their power was never real power, it was borrowed. It was extracted. It was built entirely on the empath's willingness to stay small. The moment that willingness dies, so does everything the narcissist built on top of it. The haunting question at the center of this video is this. What does the narcissist do when the one person they could always control becomes completely, utterly uncontrollable? The answer is something they will never admit out loud. But their behavior betrays them, every single time. This video is not about revenge. It is not about becoming cruel or cold or calculated. It is about something far more powerful than any of that. It is about what happens when an empath finally, completely, irrevocably chooses themselves, and what that choice does to the narcissist who built their entire reality around that empath's surrender. If you have ever felt like you were living inside someone else's story, like your emotions, your needs, your very presence was only acceptable when it served their purpose, then what I'm about to tell you is going to feel like the first breath of air after years underwater. Stay with me. The narcissist selected you with precision. They studied you. They identified every beautiful, generous, feeling part of you, and they built a cage out of it. They used your love as a leash, your empathy as a chain, your loyalty as a wall. They were meticulous. They were certain. They believed they had you permanently. They were wrong. Because what the narcissist fundamentally misunderstood about the empath is this. Beneath all that softness, beneath all that patience and grace and forgiveness, there is a core of absolute iron. And when that core is finally activated, when the empath reaches the point of no return, nothing the narcissist has ever used will work again. So this is the video where we explore that moment of activation. The moment the empath stops being manageable. The moment the narcissist looks into the eyes of the person they thought they owned, and sees something looking back that they have never seen before. Something they cannot name. Something that makes them, for the first time, afraid. To understand why the empath's awakening is so catastrophic for the narcissist, you first must understand the narcissist's entire operating system. Everything they do, every manipulation, every performance, every calculated cruelty, is designed to maintain one thing, a sense of absolute, unchallenged control over their environment. The narcissist does not experience the world the way you do. They do not feel connection, they feel leverage. They do not feel love, they feel utility. Every person in their life is categorized by what they provide: validation, resources, status, or supply. The empath, to the narcissist, is the highest grade fuel source available. Here is the psychological architecture beneath the narcissist's confidence. It is not strength, it is scaffolding. Elaborate, constantly maintained, desperately defended scaffolding erected over a void so deep and so terrifying that the narcissist has never once looked directly into it. Their entire life is the act of not looking down. The empath threatens that scaffolding in a way no one else does, not because they attack it, but because they see through it. The empath's depth of perception, their ability to sense what lies beneath the surface of a person, means they are always, on some level, seeing the real narcissist. The hollow one. The frightened one. And that visibility is the narcissist's deepest, most primal fear. To be truly seen, not the performance, not the mask, not the curated self, but the actual interior landscape of shame and emptiness beneath it. The empath sees it, has always seen it, and the narcissist has always known that they see it. This is why the narcissist works so relentlessly to destabilize the empath's perception. If the empath begins to trust what they see, the narcissist is exposed. So the narcissist wages a continuous campaign against the empath's confidence, clarity, and self-trust. Gaslighting is not cruelty for cruelty's sake, it is survival for the narcissist. But here is what the narcissist never factored into their calculations. The empath's perception cannot be destroyed. It can be suppressed. It can be buried under years of self-doubt and manufactured confusion. But it cannot be killed. Because it is not a learned behavior, it is a fundamental wiring. It is who the empath is at their cellular level. Every time the narcissist successfully confused the empath, every time they rewrote a memory or invalidated an emotion, they believed they were winning. They were not winning. They were pressing down on a spring. And the physics of that are inevitable. The longer and harder you compress a spring, the more violent and absolute the release. The narcissist built their control on a foundation they believed was permanent, the empath's self-doubt. They cultivated that doubt like a garden. They watered it with criticism, fertilized it with confusion, and pruned away every relationship or experience that might have helped the empath grow beyond it. They were thorough. They were confident. They were building on sand. Because self-doubt, no matter how deeply installed, has a natural enemy, truth. And the empath, wired for truth, magnetized toward authenticity, constitutionally incapable of sustaining a lie they've identified, will always, eventually, find their way back to what is real. When they do, the garden the narcissist so carefully cultivated turns to ash overnight. The moment it happens is different for every empath. For some it is a single sentence, something the narcissist says in a moment of careless cruelty that finally lands differently than all the sentences before it. For others it is a silence, a moment of profound, clarifying stillness in which everything the empath has been told about themselves simply stops being believable. But regardless of the trigger, the internal experience is the same. Something that was bent finally straightens. Something that was dim suddenly illuminates. The empath does not become someone new in this moment. They remember who they always were. And that remembering is the single most dangerous event that can occur in a narcissist's life. Watch what changes first, the empath's eyes. Not literally, but energetically. The quality of their attention shifts. They stop looking at the narcissist with the searching, pleading, hoping gaze of someone waiting to be chosen. They start looking with the level, clear, unimpressed gaze of someone who has finally finished waiting. The narcissist notices this immediately, and their body responds before their mind does. The narcissist's first instinct is to reach for their usual tools. They attempt charm, and it lands on someone who is no longer charmed. They attempt guilt, and it finds no purchase in someone who has finished feeling guilty for existing. They attempt rage, and instead of the familiar flinch, they receive stillness. Absolute, unbothered, immovable stillness. This is the psychological plot twist that the narcissist's entire system is unprepared for. Every tool in their arsenal was calibrated for a specific target. A person who cares desperately what the narcissist thinks of them. The moment the empath stops caring, truly, finally stops, every weapon the narcissist owns becomes instantly obsolete. And in that obsolescence, something remarkable and terrifying occurs inside the narcissist. The control mechanism fails. The feedback loop that kept them regulated, the empath's reactions providing the narcissist with confirmation of their power, goes silent. And a narcissist without that feedback loop is like a puppet master whose strings have been cut. Suddenly, they are the one falling. The empath in this awakened state does not attack. They do not retaliate with cruelty. They do something far more devastating. They become indifferent. Not cold, not cruel, indifferent. Present to their own experience for the first time in years. And to the narcissist, who requires emotional reaction the way lungs require air, that indifference is suffocation. The narcissist escalates. Of course they do. They push harder, provoke louder, make grander gestures of both punishment and false affection. cycling through their entire playbook at an increasingly desperate pace. But every escalation only confirms what the empath now knows. This is not love. It has never been love. It is a system, and they are finally outside it. Here is the power dynamic in its reversed, naked truth. The empath was never powerless. They were compliant. There is an enormous difference. Powerlessness is a condition imposed from outside. Compliance is a choice, and the moment any choice is reconsidered, the entire structure built upon it becomes unstable. The narcissist built an empire on borrowed compliance. That empire has just filed for bankruptcy. The turning point is not a battle. It is not a confrontation or a dramatic ultimatum. It is quieter and more absolute than any of that. It is the empath simply, finally, deciding that their own inner world matters more than managing the narcissist's. That single, quiet, internal decision is the thing the narcissist spent years trying to prevent. They failed. And now they must face what comes next. The narcissist's collapse does not look like remorse. Do not make that mistake. It does not look like accountability or growth or genuine sorrow. It looks like panic wearing many different masks, and it is crucial that the awakened empath recognizes every single one of them for exactly what they are. The first mask is hoovering, the desperate, theatrical attempt to suck the empath back in before the exit becomes permanent. Suddenly the narcissist is everything the empath ever asked them to be. Suddenly they are attentive, vulnerable, apologetic, romantic. Every need the empath voiced and was denied is now being offered on a silver platter. This is not change. This is a performance review disguised as a love letter. When hoovering fails, and with a truly awakened empath, it will fail. The second mask appears, vilification. The narcissist, unable to recapture control through seduction, reaches for destruction. They begin rewriting the shared history with the empath cast as the villain. They campaign to friends, family, colleagues, anyone who will listen, with a version of events calibrated to devastate. But here is where the narcissist's plan begins to consume itself. The smear campaign requires an audience that still trusts the narcissist's narrative. And the empath, in their awakened state, is no longer the isolated, discredited, destabilized person the narcissist needs them to be for the campaign to work. People who know the empath recognize the distortion. The story doesn't hold. Inside the narcissist, something is fracturing at a level they have never experienced. Their external supply, the empath's reactions, the drama, the emotional engagement, has dried up completely. And without external supply, the narcissist is forced into the one confrontation they have spent their entire life engineering their existence to avoid, themselves. What they find there is catastrophic. Because beneath the performance, beneath the constructed personality, beneath every layer of false superiority and manufactured charm, there is nothing stable. There is no authentic self-waiting. There is only the original wound, as raw and as devastating as the day it was first inflicted. And now there is no empath present to help them run from it. The narcissist begins to decompensate. Their behavior becomes erratic, uncharacteristically transparent, stripped of its usual polish. They make mistakes they would never have made when regulated by the empath's supply. They overreach, overreact, overexpose themselves in ways that reveal the instability they spent years concealing behind a perfected mask. The social world begins to shift around them. People who observed the relationship from the outside, who perhaps doubted their own perceptions while the empath was present and managed, now see the narcissist unfiltered. And what they see does not match the image. The credibility the narcissist cultivated so carefully begins to erode at its edges, then faster, then all at once. The professional, social, and relational consequences compound. Because narcissistic behavior, when unregulated by a primary supply source, tends toward visibility. The grandiosity becomes arrogance. The charm becomes manipulation too obvious to ignore. The entitlement becomes hostility when not accommodated. What was hidden behind the empath's stabilizing presence is now fully, publicly visible. And in the darkest, most private hours, in the silence the narcissist cannot fill and cannot escape, They understand something they will never verbalize, never confess, and never consciously acknowledge. They needed the empath far more than the empath ever needed them. The empath was their architecture, their regulation, their ground. And now that ground is gone, and they are in free fall with no idea how to land. Now we arrive at the truth that this entire video has been building toward. The truth the narcissist never wanted you to carry inside you, because a person who knows this truth cannot be controlled. Here it is, plainly and completely. Your emotional depth was never a vulnerability. It was always the most sophisticated form of power in the room. The empath out of control, truly out of control, no longer manageable, no longer compliant, is not dangerous in the way the narcissist is dangerous. They are dangerous in a completely different and far more enduring way. They are dangerous the way a person who has remembered their own name after years of amnesia is dangerous. They are dangerous because they are now completely, irreversibly real. And reality, authentic, grounded, self-possessed reality, is the one force a narcissist cannot survive contact with. They can survive rage. They can survive sadness. They can survive pleading and confrontation and dramatic ultimatums. But they cannot survive someone who has simply, quietly, completely stopped needing their version of reality to function. The surrender the narcissist is forced into when the empath awakens is not a conscious choice. They do not decide to yield. They simply find that every mechanism of control has stopped working, simultaneously, completely, and without warning. They reach for the levers and the levers are gone. They reach for the chains and the chains have dissolved. The empath has left the building, not always physically, but psychologically, and that departure is the one they cannot reverse. For the empath in their healing, and this is important, so stay with this, the goal is not to become someone who dominates. The goal is not to flip the dynamic and become the one who controls. That is the narcissist's game, and it was always a losing game, for everyone who played it. The empath's power lies in a completely different direction, wholeness. A whole empath, one who has reclaimed their perception, their self-trust, their right to their own emotional experience, is not navigable by a narcissist. There is no entry point. There is no wound to leverage, no insecurity to excavate, no need desperate enough to be weaponized. The whole empath is not a fortress. They are simply complete. And completeness requires nothing from the narcissist. Nothing at all. Your sensitivity is not the wound the narcissist told you it was. Your depth of feeling is not the flaw they cataloged and filed away to use against you on the days they needed leverage. Your capacity to love fully, to feel completely, to remain present to the emotional reality of the world around you, these are not liabilities. They are the evidence of your humanity in its most developed form. The narcissist told you that you were too emotional, too intense, too much. And for a long time, you believed them, because you were living inside their story, and inside their story, you were always the problem. But you are no longer inside their story. You are standing outside it now, reading it clearly, and you can finally see what was always true. The story was never about you. It was always about their fear of you. So here is what healing looks like for the empath who has reached the other side of this experience. It does not look like numbness. It does not look like walls or coldness or a heart trained into stone. It looks like discernment walking hand in hand with warmth. It looks like love that has learned its own value. It looks like a person who gives generously and knows, without apology, when to stop. The narcissist surrenders when the empath awakens, not because the empath defeats them, but because the empath no longer needs to. And that is the most profound victory available in this dynamic. Not the destruction of the narcissist, but the complete, permanent, unshakable restoration of yourself. You were never the one who needed to be controlled. You were always the one who needed to be free.